Hey there, and welcome to What's the Story? We're an inquisitive bunch of hosts on a mission to uncover stories about faith and courage from everyday people. In doing that, we get the privilege of chatting with amazing guests and have the opportunity to delve into their faith journey, the hurdles they've overcome, and the life lessons they've learned along the way. If you enjoy our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com. It's your direct line to the latest episodes and detailed show notes delivered straight to your inbox. What's the Story is brought to you by Crowd Church, who fully understand that stepping into a traditional church might not be everyone's cup of joe. Crowd Church provides a digital sanctuary, a safe space to explore the Christian faith where you can engage in meaningful conversations rather than just simply spectating. So whether you're new to the Christian faith or in search of a new church family, visit crowd.church. And if you have any questions, just drop them an email to hello@crowd.church. They would love to connect with you. And now, let's meet your host and our special guest for today.
Wow, I am back with Jonathan Lewis, who has been on the show before. He's been on What's the Story? And we had such a great conversation. I absolutely loved it. And we got talking after we stopped recording about what he does with Fathers for Fathers, his ministry to men and his heart for men. And I'm like, we need to do another recording and have a conversation specifically aimed at men, which is what we're going to do. And ladies, feel free to listen in. You know, we're definitely not excluding you here, but I do want to talk. Yeah, absolutely. We do want to talk to the hearts of men. Now, just in case this is your first time with us, let me explain. Jonathan is the president of Eastport Financial Group. He's author of Deep Water and More Than Money. He's also, as I say, the founder of Fathers for Fathers. His More Than Money podcast explores the stewardships of all our assets. He is a dedicated husband and father, lives in Nova Scotia in Canada, which must be coming up to good ski season, Jonathan. He's passionate about faith.
We had our first snow a couple nights ago, Matt.
No way. You see, now this is where I start to get a little bit envious. I'm not going to lie. Are you a man of the slopes? Do you take to the slopes?
Yeah, I love skiing, but Eastern Canada doesn't lend itself as well as Western Canada. But we'll get out to Banff for my favorite hill in Canada is Fernie. It's relatively unknown. It's on the U.S. border, but it's 4 bowls. The mountains are all 12 to 14,000 feet, and it's just crazy powder, like
nice
25, 30 feet of powder.
See, now I know the Bible talks about envy, and I'm going to fall into that if I'm not too careful.
Well, you can come visit. Visit.
Yeah, no.
For a for Fathers conference, you could be one of our speakers.
I'm there, man. Just tell me where and when. I'll jump on a plane. It'd be fantastic. Right, We're the show's producer. I don't know if you ever met Sadaf. Sadaf, who produces this show.
I did.
She's from Canada.
Yeah, we chatted for maybe 10 minutes. She's like, okay, you need to do this interview with Matt. He's the guy.
Yeah. She's a legend. She actually hosts. There are 3 people that now host this podcast who do interviews. Wow. So it's not just me all the time. Sadaf's one of them, and a beautiful lady called Anna. So they're stepping into the realms of doing it all as well. But she's crazy about Canada, and I still need to go. My cousin lives over in Vancouver. I mean, I just need to go to Canada. But I have this quite unrealistic expectation. I think that Canada is just covered in snow from like this time for the next 4 or 5 months.
It will be in another couple of weeks until probably April. So it's not that unrealistic. That's why we all live 40 million Canadians. I think 39,999,000 of us live right on the U.S. border. So people say, what are you doing? Well, I'm going to go south for the winter. Oh, you're heading down to the border. Yeah, I'm just going to hang out, warm myself by the U.S. border. See what Trump's doing. Exactly.
And then come back. Oh, goodness. In fact, that's one of the big things that's happened since we last spoke, is Trump is now president-elect again. Goodness me. Yeah. It's been a fascinating, tumultuous few months, I think, politically, certainly in the UK and in the US with all the elections going on. But it's a funny one, isn't it? I was my side hustle, for want of a better expression. I do e-commerce, as you know, and I was asked this question, about how how the presidential elections would affect e-commerce sales. And obviously what we saw was mass uncertainty. Mass uncertainty means you spend less money. And so consumer confidence fell and sales fell. And it's interesting, isn't it? This time of uncertainty, I almost think it brings out the worst in people sometimes. I don't know if you've seen this, or maybe it's just me.
No, I think it's interesting. Like it's a good place to start, actually, because we're going to talk about men and what does non-toxic male look like? What does healthy masculinity? I think one of them is that there's the guy's got peace, and so right now people don't have a lot of peace.
Yeah,
there's a lot happening, and which is interesting because John even warns us, and Jesus warned us, like, read the times, like there'll be rumors of war and all these things will be happening. And he says, don't worry. Right. And so, like, you're in e-commerce. I manage money for a living. I've done it for 24 years. And I find it remarkable how people will put their trust in something that is very non-tangible, that can buy tangible things that ultimately aren't even tangible because you can't take it with you, like the Pharaohs tried.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what really is tangible, right? And I think about like I haven't always been a Christian. Like, I grew up in a cultural Christian environment, but I was 34. I'm 48 now. So 14 years ago, I think I got to a place, and this might be some of the guys listening, where I was just like, I want something real. I want truth. And I just don't feel like I'm finding it anywhere. And the world just seems like it's totally chaotic. And I just didn't want to be a cynic. I think you can become a cynic, but I'm a naturally just a really happy, optimistic person. I was like, well, I don't want to be a cynic.
Yeah.
So I want to be happy. But to be happy, I've got to have some confidence that has deeper roots than my savings, my house, and if I'm debt free.
Yeah.
Especially when you got, Trump boasting that he's got a bigger red button than Kim and his works, right? It's like, oh my dear God, help me. So, so I wanted something more transcendent, where I had some peace. And so it dawned on me during this pilgrimage, and we talked about just that journey of sanctification, where there's really only two things that I would argue for the guys listening that last forever. The first one is probably easier for you to accept, and that is your soul. So every one of us, I believe, is a spiritual being, and we have a soul that is going to outlive these. I call it the meat sack. Some of us have really nice meat sacks. I'm a pasty 48-year-old white Canadian guy with my wife literally says, you got to cover that backside up. You can't. Like, she puts on sunglasses when I walk in the shower. So, so these meat sacks aren't going anywhere other than into the grave. And then it's like, okay, well, what happens to Jonathan, like the soul that resides inside this body? And I believe they're going to live forever. And so the question then invariably is, well, there's all these religions in the world, and every one of them tells me I have to do something to earn God's favor. And only one of them tells me I don't have to do anything except accept it. And it's a free gift that I didn't earn. And it's this person saying, I want to have a relationship with your soul that he's arguing he created. And it's because he gave me this free will. He gave me the autonomy to choose whatever I want. And I can choose to be with him or and explore this relationship with him that he wants to go on eternally, or I can choose to ignore that. And, like the late Billy Graham, and I think just about everybody around the world knows Billy Graham, but like I heard him preaching a sermon, and it really hit me. He said, hell is a real place, and it wasn't created for us.
That's true.
It was created for Satan and his angels that rejected and rebelled against God. That's what it was created for. And so he said, it wasn't made for us men. It wasn't made for our wives and our children. It was made for those that rebel against him. And so he's saying, I'm giving you a free will because I don't want a relationship with a robot, right? Elon Musk has got his Optimus 3s out now. I don't know if you saw that, but
No.
$20,000 US. I don't know what that is in British pounds, like 15,000.
Yeah,
right?
about maybe 16, 17, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Wow. You guys got to get the pound rocking and rolling again.
Watch, tell me about it. Yeah.
But like, so let's say 16,000 pounds, and you can have an Optimus 3 that only needs to charge for an hour a day. It'll cook, clean, do the yard work. I'm thinking, my gosh, we're there, right? But here's what the Optimus 3 doesn't have. It doesn't have a soul, and it's going to do whatever we ask it to do because it has no free will. And I just think how amazing that we were created, and God said, I'm going to give you an eternal soul, and I'm going to let you choose to accept me or reject me. And then the other thing that is eternal, he said, is my word, right? That's the other thing that will last forever. And so there's a missionary that in Christian circles, a lot of people would know. He was in South America, and he literally is noted for saying, and you would know him, it's Jim Elliot. And it's my favorite Jim Elliot quote. He said, he's no fool who gives up that which he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. And so, I think, every guy listening, if you're not a Christian, you got to really ask yourself, what is this all about?
Yeah.
Like right now, Americans are like, Trump's back. They just, I don't know if you noticed, but they won the Congress last night. They got majority. So they got, in a congressional system, they now have the president, the Senate, and the Congress. The last time that happened was 25 years ago under Bush Jr. And so he literally can like change laws and run them through the Senate, or the Senate is the executive branch, run them through Congress with little to no resistance. And so, there's a lot of Americans that are really excited about that. And there's a lot of Americans that are petrified of that.
Yeah.
And it would have been the other way if Kamala had won. There would be a couple 100 million Americans that were excited about that, and a couple 100 million Americans who would have been like, "Oh my gosh, we're doomed." And it's like when you look at what's going on in the world stage with Israel and the conflict in the Middle East and Ukraine, and I mean, my God, now North Korea is sending troops to Belarus, right? It's like, where does this all end? And God said in the Bible that it's going to end when I send my son back to get you guys. And he already came to remediate, that which you cannot remediate, which is sin. And this was actually a big thing for me in my journey, Matt, was like, it dawned on me that every single living thing on the planet seems to have a place in the chain of life, and it's edifying. And, even if it's a lion killing, an animal in the herd in the, Saharan, the plains of Africa, there's a purpose in it. But there's no animal on the planet that destroys its own environment and each other en masse.
Yeah.
Like only a virus does that, actually. It destroys its own host. And so obviously the cynics and the atheists and people would say, oh, well, humans we're like a parasite, right? We just destroy our own host. And I mean, there's no shortage of Marvel movies and, doomsday apocalyptic things where it's like, and then we've got Bill Gates who just wants to vaccinate all of us and prevent our ability to have children. At least some people say. So, but at the end of the day, I sit here and I think, okay, so why are we like that? And the only thing I could come up with when I was in my 30s was, well, sin. Like we have this carnal nature about us that's selfish, that's self-destructive, that we put ourselves ahead of others. Like, it's like we literally come into this world wanting what we want, and we don't care what it does to others or who it hurts or what it hurts or how it hurts the planet. And really you can draw a line and say, well, we're not like a virus that destroys its host. We're just sinful. Yeah. And so that's a tough one. Like to say to you, you are sinful. and you can't even help it. Like you don't even have a way to remediate it. Like some guys have already turned us off, but the ones that are sticking around, yay you. But it's okay, because one of the greatest early church leaders who wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, which is the books written after Jesus, including Jesus' life, was the Apostle Paul. And he wrote a manifesto, if you will, when he was under house arrest in Rome, waiting to see Caesar. So he's literally appealed all the way to the highest courts because he's a Roman citizen. And he's like, I want to see Caesar. And he's going to share the gospel with the most powerful man in the world. And he's either going to convert him or get the axe. And we know it didn't go so well. But while he was waiting to see him, he wrote this book. And in the book, he wrestles with basically the first bunch of chapters, like, what's wrong with us? The same as what I'm doing here. Yeah. Then he's like, well, this is the solution. And it was Jesus, this guy who claimed to be the Son of God. So he's either crazy, a liar, or he was who he said he was. So everybody, like, you owe it to yourself to go and figure that out. Was he out of his mind? Was he a liar, or was he who he said he was? I settled on Jesus Christ was the most gutsiest guy who's ever lived on the planet. That's where I landed. It took me a few years to get there, but in the end I was like, holy cow, this guy had guts. Yeah. And it's because he was who he said he was. Yeah. And he was here for a purpose. But Paul basically says, you got a problem. Jesus is the solution. And then here's how you go and live that out. And even Paul says in Romans 7:15, he says, I don't know what's wrong with me. Even though I know the truth and I've accepted it and I believe it, I don't do what I want to do. Yeah. I sin despite myself. And then when I want to do something good, I don't do it. I do something bad. And this is like literally the guy who led the early church and was like we told him as like the man of the early church. And he did some incredible stuff. I mean, they hated what he was saying. So if you want to turn this podcast off, go ahead. I mean, they threw him off a wall. He jumped up, ran right back into the city and grabbed the mic and went, tung, 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 tung. I'm not finished. Right. I mean, you want to talk about another gutsy guy, but even then he said, I can't shake this flesh, this fleshiness of who I am. But then later on he says, but you're okay because there's no condemnation for those that take that free will that God gave us and say, I want to know God. I want to explore this. And by the way, you don't have to have it figured out. God loves when you just say, I just want to know more. Like that's actually what excites him. Yeah. Right. It's like, hey, this guy just wants a second date with me, man. That's awesome. Right. That's how God feels. And then Paul says in Romans 8, for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. And so, fathers for fathers, and the heart that I have for men, and I know you do, is it really comes down to that is, if this is true, if God created us to have souls that are going to live forever, and he's just, and he has to do something about the devil and his cronies. So he's got that sorted, but he gave us each a free will to choose to have that second date and say no to our flesh and say, I want something real. I want something more. I want something that's based in some truth that is transcendent and timeless and doesn't depend on a war in Ukraine or my bank account or what Trump does or Kamala does. I don't know who's your, I know you guys got some drama going on in your country. Yeah. So, or, a guy with even better hair than mine, Justin Trudeau. So at the end of the day, it's like, do I really want to put my stock in people, flawed people, or do I actually want to explore this guy who says, hey, like I knew you before time. I counted your hairs on your head. Psalm 139 in the Bible says you were fearfully and wonderfully made. Yeah. So for the guys listening, I would just implore you to not take anybody's word for it. Just trust your instinct. As a matter of fact, if this is making you angry, that's probably a good thing. Yeah. Because it's actually your flesh sort of raging against it. And here's a zinger. If you haven't turned me off yet, this will kill it. You actually are made for one purpose, and it's to glorify God. So it's not even about you. your whole existence, the same as the flowers in the field and the beautiful sunrise, is all about glorifying him. That is so offensive to our flesh.
Yeah.
Like everything in us just rages against that. I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, like
I'm out.
I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back to this stupid church. And the next Sunday I walked in, I sat at the back again, and I like, Matt, I don't know what you guys call it, but like I call it Sinner's Row, like the very back pew against the wall.
Yeah.
Like, cause I want to see all these crazy holy rollers coming. So if I have to like, feign a right and go left to get out of their clutches, with their, sandwiches with no crust, their board games, and Jesus loves you. And so I literally for like 7 or 8 years sat in the back row of this little rural Baptist church here, like near where we live. And, like as soon as they started, like, when they start wrapping up the service, and the pastor's going to do the whole, I'm going to go to the door and shake your hand on the way out. Like maybe they don't do that in the UK, but they still do that here in places. Yeah. So, but you know how you can do I got to go to the bathroom and I'll go out the back door kind of. And you don't park in the parking lot, right? You park across the street because you got to make a fast getaway. Yeah. So like that was me, but I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what Jim Elliot meant by, you're no fool who gives up that which you can't keep. It's like, well, what can I keep? Well, it's all of this. It's even this to gain something that you can't lose. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense to me. Like what will I always have even in eternity? And it's my soul. It's me. Yep. And what's scary, and I don't want to scare anybody, but the Bible says that if you choose not to pursue a relationship with God and you don't get to know his son, then there's a place for Satan and his cronies, but it says there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth there. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. I thought weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, those are like two different camps. And it dawned on me, the weeping are the people that heard a podcast like this or heard the truth and rejected it. It's like, oh, no, it's too like sci-fi. I'd rather just watch Marvel movies and believe in Iron Man. And then there's the gnashers. The gnashers are the ones that they're still angry, even in eternity. Yeah. They're still waving their fist at God. Yeah. And they got a hatred on for him that like, wow. But my heart breaks for the weepers, the ones that kind of, they heard the truth. They said, yeah, maybe I'll get around to it. Or they passively explored it, but they didn't really pursue it. Life got the better of them. And those are the people that I really feel a burden for. Yeah. So yeah,
that's all the introduction.
Yeah,
which is great. What do you think it is? We started off talking about peace, and actually, one of the great gifts that I think God gives us is this undescribable peace. I think Scripture calls it, doesn't it? This sort of a peace which passes all understanding, depending on which translation you read. Yeah. And it guards our hearts and it guards our minds. And I think about the current culture. You talked about how, we, as men, we don't have to have it all figured out. You can come to God. You don't need it all figured out. But at the same time, we live in a culture where I think, for men, we feel like we have to have it all figured out. I don't know if that's just me, but is that something that is innate in us, do you think? Is that something that we have learned, I guess, through our lives, through the way that we are? I think it takes a lot to admit that you don't know everything. I mean, age, I think, is probably one of them. When I was in my early 20s, I knew I was talking.
You knew you had it figured out.
Well, I was talking to a friend. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, right, about his son. So he was talking about his son. He's like and his son was like 19 years old, and he said he just doesn't listen to me. This was his complaint. He's not listening to a word I'm saying about this particular thing. And I looked at him and I said, and what part of you is actually surprised? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, when you were 19, can I ask you a question? Did you know more than your parents? And he said, yes, of course I did. And I'm like, why do you think your 19-year-old son is going to be any different, right? Of course you. But as you get older, I think you realize you know less and less, really. But it's an interesting one, isn't
Exactly.
it? That is this innate in us as men? Is it a pure masculine thing? Is it? I'm curious where you stand on it.
I don't know. Like, the more I try and understand the masculine journey, I feel like there's so much in common between men and women that we're not as different as we like to think we are. No, we are definitely different. My wife will attest to that. But yeah, we'll just speak to the guy side of this. So I think as guys, whether it's our culture, our family dynamics, the environment we grew up in, but it does seem to be a global thing, and that there's an expectation that we are fixers. We will fix it. We want to fix it. We are more hardwired. When you think about fight or flight, I think most guys fall into fight, not all. And so, even the ones that would be fleers would be like, well, there's got to be a way to fix this. So they might want to withdraw from the conflict to figure out a way to solve the problem. But we tend to be fixers, right? And so I think that I know for me, like I can really move at a high frequency. I'm used to doing a lot, and I'm used to getting a lot done, and I'm used to having a lot of very talented people around me that I can lean on that are also very good. And so I get disappointed when we hit a ceiling of complexity and everybody's like, Jay, we just can't take any more on. I'm like, what? Right? What? So they all make fun of me. That's apparently my reaction is, what? But as if I'm just completely shocked. What do you mean we've hit a max capacity? What? But I think guys are naturally wired to want to fix it. But I also think, like I know with my wife, she kind of wants to know that I have a plan, and it gives her some solace if she knows I have a plan. And that's not the dynamic of every household, and I'm certainly keenly aware of that. So, but I know for me, just speaking to the guys, when I wrote More Than Money, and I did a whole podcast on this, although my guest wasn't that stellar on time. We talked about time, and then he went like on forever, and we never talked about time. But so I might have to circle back around and do another interview on stewarding time. But there's only 168 hours in a week. It doesn't matter if you're in Gulu, Uganda, Liverpool, Halifax, Nova Scotia, New York City, Tokyo. We all got 168 hours. Like, how interesting, right?
Yeah.
Nobody gets more. Nobody gets less. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. And we don't even know if we get the 168 hours because we actually aren't even in control of our lives.
Yeah.
And that these bodies will eventually fail us, and we don't know when. So I think acknowledging where you are in the pecking order, which is we're a finite being with only 168 hours. And I always of the mindset, if God's willing and in his grace, I have, because I don't know if I have the next hour after this podcast. I hope I do. And then I get to a place where I'm like, okay, well, I sleep for 50, hopefully, as you get older. That seems to get harder. It's more trips to the bathroom. And then we work for, say, 50. So it leaves me with 68 hours. Well, what could really in my arrogance, in my pride, what can I actually accomplish in 68 hours? Like, not a lot. Right. By the time I eat, try and get some exercise, be present in, the lives of the people that matter most to me. You start working backwards there. The time ticks down. And so I know I got to a place where I was like, okay, well, if I believe that God is before time, outside of time, he says, I am the beginning, the end, the Alpha, the Omega. He's not even constrained by time, right? Like we have a hard time understanding God because we're linear in our thought process. And I trust that what he says is like, I actually care about you. Like I, in all my omnipotence, I love you. And I actually counted the hair on each guy listening to this podcast and woman. It's like, he says, a sparrow doesn't fall from the sky without me knowing. And thinking, okay, well, if that's the case, what pressure do I actually really have on me? Like, do I have to do this with the 68 hours I have? Or is it more important that I'm sort of looking to him and saying, hey, what would you have me do here? Like if we're friends, which I understand is what you're telling me we are, and you sent your son to die on a cross for me because I couldn't solve this flesh issue I have. I kind of need to know what you want me to do right now. And I don't feel like I should be stressed or worried or not have peace in my heart if I really trust that you are who you say you are. And so it's not to say that I live this out perfectly. There's highs and lows, right? Because let's not forget, there's that crony with, a third of heaven that like hates God and he hates us. And if you go down this pilgrimage where you start trying to get to know God better, you'll definitely experience some things that you're like, wow, these guys sold me a bill of goods I don't sign up for. Johnny Cash said being a Christian takes guts and it's not easy and it's not for every man.
That's so true.
And I think it's true. Like,
don't you think that we've made it? Let me clarify what I was going to say, because I've been a Christian 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Just over 30 years. I became a Christian when I was 18. And when I became a Christian, it was a high call, right? You understood that when you became a Christian, you had to lay down your cross. And there was these conversations, you had to pick up your cross, lay down your life. This was going to be something that cost you. It's a bit like the old Shackleton kind of ad, we want explorers, we want adventurers. It's going to be long hours. It's going to be cold. It's going to be an adventure and you're probably going to die. And, men sign up for that kind of thing, don't they? And it's that call to adventure, but that call to a tough adventure. It's going to take guts. And then we kind of went through the 90s where it was, doesn't matter what your problem is, come to Jesus, he'll solve it, kind of a thing. And the challenge
Jesus in a lamp.
Yeah.
Jesus in a lamp. Tell him your three wishes.
Yeah, exactly. Just, he'll fix it. And
because he loves you.
Yeah, because and I get that. I get why that would be a phrase, but it became almost easier to talk about the easy Jesus, and we stopped talking about actually God is going to take your life. He is going to shake you upside one side and down the other. And he is going to love you. He is going to create you in his image. And he is going to have some adventures for you, but you are going to have to dig deep.
Yeah. Here's some basic premises. If you accept the fact that our bodies are going to die, right? And this is a fallen world with all kinds of brokenness. And even if a whole bunch of people said, yeah, okay, I believe in Jesus, there's a whole bunch of people that don't. So you're going to have wickedness. You're going to have all kinds of terrible things happen. You're going to have men raping women, countries attacking countries. Hopefully not Kim with his little red button going up against Trump with his big red button. But like wars are going to happen. People are going to get murdered. And so then it's like, okay, well, how do I live in that as this follower of Jesus? And what does the, Jesus in a lamp do for me?
Yeah.
And I really got to a place where it's like, okay, Adam and Eve chose to eat the tree of the good knowledge of good and evil. And they made a choice for all of us, is what the Bible tells us that now we're all stricken with. So I'm choosing to reject that moment in my own life where it's like, okay, Lord, I don't want to lean on my own understanding. I want to understand the way you see the world and the way you see me and my place in it. But here's the thing. He doesn't promise that after that it's roses and sunshine and Christians are going to walk around like with, pixie birds coming out of their hair. And it's like, sunflowers and, skippity-loo. Like, he's like, no, you're going to live in this fallen, broken world and you are going to be my light to it. So what does that look like? Well, in my life, I had a grandfather who was a World War II vet. He fought under Montgomery, actually, because he signed up with the British Fusiliers in Vancouver, who then deployed under Montgomery in Africa, Italy, and Operation Market Guard. He came home an alcoholic. My great uncle would go visit him in the brig whenever he went to visit him because he was always fighting. Alcohol became the way he coped with PTSD from all the conflict he saw. He saw his entire platoon wiped out by one Italian tank in the Italian campaign. So then he brought that into the home with my grandmother and my dad and his two brothers, where they were all abused. And then my dad, I grew up with a dad who was like, well, I'm never going to drink like my dad, but he still struggled with that abusive nature.
Yeah.
So he was verbally abusive and sometimes physically abusive. I love my dad like any young boy. I just longed for his approval. I think that's something that men have in our DNA. We long for the approval of a male role model. Mm-hmm. I believe that's actually written in our spiritual DNA to long for God's approval. Yeah. That's why we're that way. Our father-son relationships that we have is God giving us that experience to model after, except very often they're broken, damaged. We become damaged. So then we have this tainted idea of what God the Father, what a relationship with the Heavenly Father would look like, because we didn't have a good one down here. My dad drowned. Him and I were scuba diving just after my 15th birthday. I dragged his dead body from the Atlantic Ocean to the beach. I went through a season of homelessness, couch surfing, living in my car, lived in the Rocky Mountains, planting trees, joined the Canadian Armed Forces, learned how to drink, probably was what kept me out of jail. Had a stepdad who came into our home, who's a good man, but there was no place for me in that home. Had a hate on for God, was like, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. Went out to prove myself, made my first $1 million by the time I was like 25, 26 years old. Mm-hmm. In my anger, messed up a wonderful relationship with my high school sweetheart because I was just angry at the world and damaged. That led to a marriage that ended in divorce with two little girls that were 3 and 2 at the time. And she was unhappy, didn't want, to be in the marriage. And it just goes on and on. Even now, in the past 6 months, we've had a car get washed away in a flood. We got a new car. We had it for 6 days. It still had the original tank of gas. My wife got creamed by a guy doing 110 kilometers an hour. She's still suffering from a concussion. I've had skin cancer. And, 4 months ago, my business was overdrawn and I was 2 weeks away from wondering how I was going to make payroll because I'm trying to grow it so fast. So you can fill in all the other drama that goes in there. And that's just like Jonathan's life in a nutshell. And it's like, okay, like how can this guy actually like be at peace and trust God? Well, it's simple. He's not Jesus in a lamb, but he didn't promise that he was going to take away all the woes and hardships. Here's what he said. He said, I will take your entire narrative of your life. And if you trust me with it, I will, even all the bad stuff, I will work it for good for my glory. Mm-hmm. And I'll work it for good for you, but you got to trust me. And so it's a really funny thing because it's like, how do you trust a God you cannot see and trust that some guy who walked around for 3 years, 2,000 years ago and disrupted the status quo of both the political environment and the religious environment. So they nailed him across and then somehow for 2,000 years, billions of people have staked their eternal hope on this guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, you get to a point where you're like, okay, all this hardship, all this difficulty that every one of us has in our life, and I'm just one, if ultimately I'm his and I trust him, then does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? And so I'll give you an example. When I went through a season 2 years ago where our teenage daughters were like, "Hey, we don't want to be with you and Sarah," right? So Sarah and I've been married 11 years now. She's an amazing woman. We want to live with mom. It was crushing, and I remember fasting and praying, saying, "Lord, like I've signed up for everything, but I can't survive this. Like I've been fatherless. I don't know how my kids would want to be fatherless. How can you allow this to happen? I've done everything you've asked me to do. I've stayed in her hometown, just a few doors down from my ex-in-laws for my kids. And now they're just ditching me." And you know what he said to me? All I got on the winds of the Spirit was, "Do you trust me?" Mm-hmm. That was it. I was so ticked off. I was like, I was looking for a little more than that. And it was, "Do you trust me?" And it was, "Do you trust me? And do you believe that I love those kids more than you do? Mm. And is this about you and them or about them and me? Like, is it more important to you that they know me, or is it more important that they come back to you? Like, what are you praying for here?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you really believe what you say you believe, which is you have an eternal soul that's going to live on forever, as do they, isn't it more important that they know me? Shouldn't you be interceding and praying that? So, when you and I were talking earlier about it's not for the weak of heart. Living in this world is not for the faint of heart. It's tough.
No.
That's why people become bitter and cynical, and they hate Christians. And, they're like, your God, if your God is real, then why does he allow all this to happen? Well, he doesn't want this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
We chose this for ourselves. But what he promises is he will walk through the storm with us and he will deliver us out of it. And so the problem we have as humans is there's something very transcendent to our lives. And it's not the 70 or 80 years that we are here, right? Like we're literally going to head into eternity and realize that when he says you are but a vapor, like really our life here was a vapor. And the only real question is do we trust him, and do we have the peace that comes from knowing that this is all just temporal? And, people say to me all the time, well, don't worry, your kids will come back. I'm like, well, I know that.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it makes you feel better to say that because it's the cliche thing to say, but I actually know my kids are coming back because I know my Father,
mm-hmm.
and I know his word, and he is pursuing them, right? I'm pursuing them, but I can't do near what he can do to pursue
mm-hmm.
them. And they're coming back, and it's not because of me, it's because of him, and it's for him, right? He'll finish what he started. He says he'll leave the 99 to go get the one lost sheep.
Yeah.
And so my only responsibility is to walk that out and have that peace, have that trust. And by the way, when I was 2 weeks away, I hope none of my employees watch this. I was 2 weeks away from not being able to make my payroll in June. I was like, Lord, what gives? And he's like, well, I want you to rest, and you're striving. You're actually trying in your ego and your pride with the 68 hours you have, you're trying to make this happen.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do it. And so I actually want you to take time off. And so I took time off, and we went from being overdraft to having double what we needed in 4 weeks, from June 4th to July 4th. And I know it was just the Lord's way of sort of just showing off a bit. And that wasn't Jesus in a lamp. That was a son being submitted to a father's authority and saying, okay, I trust you. And the thing is sometimes it doesn't go good. And you're like, okay, has he abandoned me? But even then it's like, I know he's building my character. Like you look at the story of Job. I mean, I can't even imagine when that first messenger came to Job, and the story of Job, the house collapse on his oldest son's house with all of his kids in it.
Mm-hmm.
And guy comes in, he's like, house collapse, all your kids are dead. And then it's just messenger after messenger of all the horrific things that happen. And Job cursed the day that he was born, but he never cursed God. I don't know if you ever really noticed that.
Yeah.
And he actually said, though you slay me, yet will I trust you, in Job 13:15. And I think that that's really the peace comes from getting to a place where your view of God is such that you know in his sovereignty that he does love you, and whatever's happening, even if it seems horrific, if you give him time, something miraculous it will transpire in your life.
Yeah.
And you might not even see it until we've died and gone into eternity, which for a non-Christian is like, what? Who cares? I'm dead. But it's like, you're not. Your body is dead, but your soul is going to go on for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So that's where,
That's so
for me,
true.
the peace comes from.
Yeah. Well, there's a joy in that, isn't there? And this is, I think, where joy comes from. Is when actually, you talk about joy in having a joy in life. It's not it's not burying your head in the sand. It's not pretending that things aren't actually going on. It's knowing that in spite of them, God is ultimately going to win. And there's a joy that comes from that. So in the midst, and Scripture talks about this, doesn't it? In terms of in the midst of the trial, in terms of the midst of tribulation, we can count it all joy when we get into these things.
Your trials and tribulations. James 1:2.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus' brother.
Yeah.
Jesus' own brother said that, and he mocked Jesus. He's like, oh, come on. Like, I grew up in the same house as you.
Yeah.
Right. And then he writes those words, and he becomes the leader of the most persecuted church of his day in Jerusalem. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and it doesn't end well for James either, but it's one of those where it's like, can it all, joy? And you kind of look at that and go, that does not make sense from a natural standpoint. But when we look at the beginning to end in the context of eternity, in the context of the fullness of God, you're like, okay, this changes everything. I was at a wedding the other day with my wife, Shannon and I. We went to a friend's wedding, a beautiful ceremony. Now, Tony, when he got married a number of years ago to his first wife, Ruth, and Ruth died of cancer. Everyone was praying for her. Everyone loved Ruth. Ruth was an absolute legend. Just one of the loveliest people on the planet. But she, and I've seen God heal all kinds of crazy things. Mm-hmm. So everyone was praying for her. But she was, until her last breath, she was like, no, God can heal me. I know that. But if he doesn't, then ... And they made a whole bunch of plans. Tony met one of Ruth's friends from university who lost her husband early. He died. And so those two got together out of grief. They fall in love at first sight. And I went to their wedding. So I've been to both Tony's weddings. And the second wedding a few weeks ago, everyone's in bits. Everyone's in tears because we're so happy in some respects for Tony. And, there's some redemption that's come out of this sadness. And it took him several minutes to say it, actually, in the vows, to say till death us do part, because for him, that's real.
He knows what that means.
He knows exactly what that means. He has been through the coalface. And you know what? They both have, and they're both sweet and lovely people, and they are still so committed to God. And they're very much like, I don't understand it. I can't give you rhyme or reason, but I can tell you God is with me.
And here's how God ties a bow on that, right? So here are these two people that have this tragic loss. They, by way of restoration, come to each other under God. And God can take like I always say, there's no testimony with a test.
Yeah,
right?
that's
testimony. True. And think about how that couple can be a force of nature for people going through similar difficulties and loss going forward. Yeah. Just like even for young couples, like, I mean, I don't know what divorce rates are in the UK, but in North America, we're pushing 58%. I mean, why even bother getting married? Yeah. Right. Well, in Quebec, actually, they charge you to change your last name to your husband's name because they're so sick and tired of changing it back. I'm not kidding. So, that's bad. But think about what a powerhouse couple they would be for young people in counseling when it comes to sticking to their vows and recognizing that their vow is not just between the two of them, but it's actually much more importantly between them and God. And it's a triangle with God at the top of it. Sarah and I talk about that all the time. Like, like with her health issues she's having with her concussion, it has been hard, and it's been since April, and she can't work. Right. So that puts pressure on us as a couple. But for both of us, I know where we're at. It's like, okay, well, this vow was between Sarah and God and Jonathan and God. And then it's between Sarah and Jonathan. And so, imagine a couple like that, counseling young couples around the nuances of marriage and their vows going forward. Right. What a God story.
Yeah, and the redemption is quite extraordinary, and I'm going to be inviting them around to dinner soon. Catch up with them because I here's the thing, Jonathan. Right, people ask me who inspires you, right, and the people that inspire me are the people that have gone through some of the most heartbreaking stuff that I've not experienced. My wife is still alive. We've been married 26 years. She is an absolute amazing person, and I'm super grateful for her every day, right? So that's my story. But the people like Tony and Jean who have lost husbands, or people that have been through divorce, or people that have dealt with insane levels of sickness, some friends of ours were survivors of breast cancer, or the fact she's on the What's the Story podcast. Annie Uddin tells her story of how she, of dealing with cancer. We've got friend, who's had a pacemaker fitted on their bowel and had, I mean, just incredible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They go through it and they are so sweet in their relationship with God. They're just so humble and kind, and they're beautiful people. They have no resentment. They have no bitterness. And they just live off the mercy of God. And you can't help but be. Who are the most inspiring people? They're the most inspiring people. They don't go to pieces. Not that I've got issues with people asking questions or going to pieces, but it's more they come out the other side refined and just better, lovelier people. And they're the most inspiring.
Yeah. Character.
Yeah.
They build character. Yeah. It's funny, when you and I, we'll have to wrap up here, but when you said, what's the difference between godly masculinity and toxic masculinity before we came online, and I'm working on the immersive study for Fathers for Fathers. So it's like an alpha program just for men. And my publisher yesterday, we spent about 4 or 5 hours on it because it was Veterans Day in the US and Remembrance Day in Canada for our vets. And so after we took in the ceremonies for the brave men and women who died, we were working on that. And he said, what's the number one characteristic of a godly man? I said, humility. A man who's been through the fire, who has developed all those fruits of the Spirit, long suffering, love, joy, peace, kindness, and it goes on. There's a real humble spirit about those men. They're very deliberate. Their personalities stay there. Like my EA, who's buzzing me right now to get into my next meeting. I was very flattered. She said, you are a very gregarious, focused, hardworking, deliberate, driven guy. But she said, you're also very humble. To me, that is the greatest compliment anybody could give me, because I am out of the box. My default programming was not humility. Going back to, you're talking about the 20-year-old son, but God has humbled me as a way of refining my character, so that it's like, okay, you've got all these natural talents, but I need to harness that. I need you to be humble. I need to take you through some trials and some tribulation and some storms where you really are rocked to the point where you are dependent on me. And by virtue of that, you know that it's, by my grace that you go. And so, to finish up, the encouragement I would have for guys is, if you don't know Christ, if you haven't really given God much thought, think about this. In your heart of hearts, do you recognize something is very wrong with our world? And if the answer is yes, then you're not alone, because it's always been there. We have technology and sophistication that we didn't have 150 years ago, but the human heart has had a condition throughout all of human history. And I would just encourage you to explore what God has to say. And I read the Quran in English. I looked at other religions, and what I found fascinating about the Christian religion was that it's the only thing you don't have to do anything to earn it. It's a free gift. You just have to receive it. And you have to recognize that you have an ailment that you can't fix, and he's telling you he's already fixed it. And so if that offends you, I would almost want you to call me directly so we can hack it out some more, because there was a time when it offended me. That offended me.
Yeah.
Right. And it's meant to offend, but in a good way.
Yeah.
So
fantastic. Have the guts to follow your calling, I think is, I like that, the whole guts to just do it and check it out. But Jonathan, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Real blessing. Thank you for coming on again.
Yeah, man. And we'll get you over here to Canada. Maybe I'll cook up some big excuse for you to speak, and we can get you over here, and we'll take you. We won't get you to Vancouver. Maybe we can take you to Mont Tremblant in Quebec, and you can ski on a 7,000 foot hill.
Just let me know where and when I'm there.
All right.
You're a real blessing, Jonathan. Thanks, brother.
Yeah. All right, man. God bless.
And just like that, we've reached the end of another fascinating conversation. Crowd Church is a digital church, a community, a space to explore the Christian faith, and a place where you can contribute and grow. To find out more, check out www.crowd.church. And don't forget to subscribe to What's the Story on your favorite podcast app. We've got a whole lot of inspiring stories coming your way, and we really don't want you to miss any of them. What's the Story is the production of Crowd Church. Our fantastic team is made up of Anna Kettle, Matt Edmondson, Tanya Hutzalak, and myself, Sadaf Bainan. We work behind the scenes to bring these stories to life. Our theme song is the creative work of Josh Edmondson. If you're interested in the transcript or show notes, head over to our website, what'sthestorypodcast.com, and sign up for our weekly newsletters to get all this goodness delivered straight to your inbox. So that's all from us this week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.